IELTS Graduation, Class CD, CD1, Track 1.
Good morning, and how can I help you?
Good morning. My name is Sandra da Costa. I'm a first-year student and I'm a bit confused about a few things. I was told by a lecturer to come here.
Okay then, take a seat, Sandra, and let me see how I can help you. Because this is your first year here, I'll need a few personal details. What did you say your name was again?
Sandra da Costa.
Is that Sandra?
No, it's spelt with an O.
So that's S-O-N-D-R-A.
Mm-hmm.
And can you spell your surname, please?
It's D-A-C-O-S-T-A.
Is that all one word?
No, it's 2 words actually.
Fine. And are you living on campus or in other accommodation?
I'm living in university residences in Bramble House, the one on the main campus, room number 13.
How are you finding it so far?
Much better than I expected. I have quite a large room and we have a shared kitchen and bathroom. The other students I've met seem really friendly.
That's good to hear. I think you've made a wise decision living on campus. Now, just a few more details and then we can go on to discuss what's worrying you. Where are you from?
My mother is from South America, but I was born in the north of Spain.
That's interesting. And one more thing. Do you have a number we can contact you on in emergencies?
Yes, I have a mobile number. It's 07764 543302.
Let's just check that. Did you say 07764 543332?
No, it's 543302.
That's fine, Sandra. Thank you. That's all the information I need for the moment.
Track 2.
So, how can I help you?
Well, I'm really worried about how I'm going to cope with university life. I mean, I feel like I don't know what's going on.
Don't worry, Sandra. Most undergraduates feel like this in their first week.
Well, maybe if I knew the campus a bit better, that might help.
Do you have a map of the campus?
Yes, I was given one during orientation week, but to be honest, I don't really understand it.
Well, let's look at it together. Okay, we are here now in Dalton House.
Mm-hmm.
Opposite this building is the arts block, where you'll find the computers. The computer rooms are open from 9 a.m. till 10:30 p.m. weekdays, but closed on the weekends.
Are there no other computers on campus?
There are a few in the library that are available throughout the year, except Sundays. To get to the library, you keep going down University Lane, past the science block on your left. Opposite the science block are the chemistry labs, and the library is just on the right, next to Lab B.
Fine.
Another important building is the Students' Union. Turn left into Newton Drive. There are some trees and a little outside cafeteria. The Students' Union is just behind this. One thing I must check, have you sorted out your fees yet?
Well, I filled in a direct debit form, so I suppose that means everything is fine.
Probably, but you should go to the finance office just to make sure. It's at the end of Newton Drive. You'll need some identification, your passport or student ID.
And is there a bank on campus?
Yes, it's open normal banking hours and there is a 24-hour cash machine. The bank's in Isaac Street, which runs parallel to University Lane, where we are now. Go past Lecture Hall B and the bank is opposite, just before you get to Lecture Hall A.
Great.
Probably the best thing to do is to walk around and familiarise yourself with everything. Don't worry, it won't take you long to settle in.
I'm sure you're right. I feel a lot better.
I also need you to fill in this form for the tutorial file. Take it away with you and then make an appointment to see me again and we'll go over it. My telephone number is on the form here at the bottom of the page. You can ring me anytime between 9 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. from Monday to Friday, except on a Thursday when I'm only available in the morning.
Track 3.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Stop Smoking Now. You're all here today because you've decided to stop smoking. However, making the decision to stop is just the first step. Yet if you follow these guidelines, no matter how tough it may be to begin with, rest assured You will be on your way to becoming what you want to be, an ex-smoker. The first thing to remember is that there is not only one way. What I'll give you today are various methods you can choose from. They all work and they can all help. The first method I would recommend is based on something we all have, but in different degrees, namely willpower. Of course, just making the decision to stop is an enormous act of willpower alone. But what exactly does this mean? It means having a strong mind, waking up every morning and telling yourself that you will not have that cigarette, no matter how much you may want one. To do this successfully, you really have to be determined to stay focused. You need to be in the right frame of mind. But this isn't as easy as it may sound, and it may mean doing other things to take your mind off having that cigarette, particularly when the urge is strong. I found that different things can help you do this, like taking up a hobby, or having a smoking buddy, someone you can phone up when the going gets tough, a friend who can help you think about something else. Remember that each time you don't have a cigarette, you will feel better and stronger. Of course, this method does not work for everyone, but there are other ways to help keep you on track. Another way is to use smoking aids. There are many types, so find one that suits you best. Take, for example, nicotine patches. You put one on every day and it gives you a controlled nicotine dose. Basically, you keep reducing the amount until your body stops craving nicotine. As your body gets used to less nicotine, you may experience withdrawal symptoms. Don't worry about feeling embarrassed people will notice, because many nicotine patches are see-through. So, where do you get them? Well, you can buy them from your local pharmacy or supermarket. You can also ask your GP for a prescription.
Track 4.
Another method that is becoming more popular is alternative therapies. Giving up smoking is not only difficult for your body, but also your mind, as the emotional stress can be really severe. One therapy that springs to mind is acupuncture. This can help you relax, calm you down, making you much more likely to want to give up. Acupuncture usually lasts between 50 to 90 minutes. As your body and mind become stronger, you should need fewer sessions. The good thing about acupuncture is that it takes harmful toxins caused by smoking out of your body. And I'm sure you'll all like this, it does not increase your appetite. So giving up smoking using this method means you won't put on weight. It can take as few as 5 acupuncture sessions to cure you, but of course this depends on the type of person you are. I suppose one of the biggest advantages of using this method is that there are almost no withdrawal symptoms because it works from the inside. What I mean by this is that acupuncture takes away your wanting to smoke, and this feeling, on top of the feeling of calmness, stays with you after the treatment is over. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter which method you choose. What's important is that you make the decision and then stick to it no matter what. If you give up, think of the money you'll be saving. There is no better time to start than today. You can kick the habit for good.
Track 5.
Now, I'm going to give you a topic, and I want you to speak about it for 1 to 2 minutes. First, you have 1 minute to think about what you're going to say, and you can make some notes. Here is your topic. I want you to describe an older person who has had an influence on your life. Okay?
Well, I think a person who had most influence is probably my grandfather. He is important for me. He always helped me. I did not meet him really because he is my grandfather. So actually, he was always in my life. Really, we did many things together. He played with me always, and sometimes read me story. Actually, I like reading books because it can help me to relax. I'm reading a good book now. It's about this woman and she remember her life. Actually, it's a bit of a love story, but I'm liking it very much.
Track 6.
Hi there, Sang-min. What have you been up to?
I've just been to a tutorial. Weren't you two supposed to attend?
Yes, we were. But I had an essay to finish and Julianne offered to help.
Did we miss much?
Well, I thought it was quite interesting. It was all about spending habits among undergraduates. It was based on recent research done by a PhD student studying behavioral psychology.
Oh, yes. I remember being interviewed by him about what I usually spend my money on.
And what did you say?
Well, most of my money, probably around 75%, goes on basic living, paying rent, food costs, and of course, university fees.
I'm the same, except my food bill is higher.
We are all in the same boat here. Virtually all my money goes on that too, but I also spend a lot of money on textbooks, between 100 and 120 pounds a month, usually more. Realistically, it's closer to 150 pounds.
That explains why you get such good marks. Another aspect of the interview was students' use of credit cards, with a particular focus on how students manage these.
In my case, not very well. I always end up spending more than I plan to. It's too easy to use.
Surely that must be the point, that students are given credit cards too easily before they've learned how to use them. And the number of credit cards some students get, it's frightening. The average is about 3 cards.
Not only cards. Students need to learn how to manage money too. And this is what the interviews meant to find out. By comparing and contrasting all the data, the root causes of student spending could be highlighted.
And the effects this has on students, I'd imagine, would be more negative than positive.
Perhaps, but this was the other part of what the student was trying to achieve. You also need to study the effects to find answers.
Track 7.
But I think it all goes back to how we were taught to manage money when we were children.
That's true. Our behavior now is closely related to the childhood environment and what we learned from that.
But how far back should we go? When do children really begin forming an understanding of what money means?
I've read that children between 3 and 5 can understand what's right and wrong. That's when they can learn concepts like sharing. At the age of 6, most children can understand the value of money.
This suggests that if parents offered practical advice to their children at an early age, it could have a very positive impact on their spending habits in later life.
It basically comes down to 3 areas. The first one is allowance. Parents should not try to focus on how much money they give their children, but rather on what they need.
Needs are difficult to define, so parents need to resist the urge to give in when their children say, "I want."
For me, the only way to teach children the difference between needs and wants is to give them a practical allowance. If my parents had not done that for me when I was younger, I don't think I would be able to handle the money they give me now.
True. The second thing I think is important is saving.
Can you explain a bit more?
Well, basically, parents need to introduce their children to personal finance. If we are expected to deal with money now, then we have to learn when we're younger.
I see what you mean. And it could be in quite simple ways, like by helping them to open their own savings account.
There's one more area I think is vital.
What's that?
It's buying. We spend excessively on credit cards because we don't know how to control money. We almost need to learn how and what to buy, which is why parents should allow their children to participate in this. If they want something expensive, like a new pair of trainers, then they could be encouraged to save a bit of their allowance.
And parents could also promise to help by saying that they will pay the rest if the child, at the end of their period of saving, still does not have enough.
Track 8. 1.
Application. Apply.
2.
Association. Associate.
3.
Communication. Communicate.
4.
Concentration. Concentrate.
5.
Direction. Direct.
6.
Education. Educate.
7.
Examination. Examine.
8.
Formation. Form.
9.
Information. Inform.
10.
Instruction. Instruct.
11.
Operation. Operate.
12.
Organization. Organize.
13.
Population. Populate.
14.
Production. Produce.
15.
Reaction. React.
16.
Relation. Relate.
17.
Situation. Situate.
18.
Variation. Vary.
Track 9.
The Department of Energy denied claims that a change in its energy policy is being debated in light of fresh evidence of global warming. A government minister denied that a decision has been taken to back technologies for harnessing the power of renewable and sustainable sources of energy, such as wind and solar power. The department claims that renewables are unable to generate enough power to meet growing energy requirements economically. Campaigners for the environment point out that, given the predicted steep rise in energy consumption, it is more important than ever that the government takes steps to reduce demands for conventional sources of energy, like fossil fuels, which are damaging to the environment.
Track 10.
Good afternoon, Dr. Dartford speaking.
Good afternoon, Dr. Dartford. It's Miranda Smith here.
Oh, hello, Miranda. How can I help you?
I'm really sorry, but I couldn't come to your lecture on the government's waste strategy yesterday because I was feeling ill. My essay has to be handed in 2 weeks' time, and I'm worried I might have missed something important. I really don't like it when I miss lectures, especially when I need the information for an essay.
Well, try not to worry. You can't help being sick. How about if I give you a quick summary of the main points?
That'd be great, thanks. Just let me get a pen. Right, I'm ready.
To begin with, I stressed the importance of us reusing and recycling waste in the future. I made particular reference to the UK, which at the moment only recycles about 8% of household waste. The levels of industrial and commercial waste are much higher. It's frightening how much waste factories produce on a daily basis, but that's not all. The fact is that not only is this rate of recycling well below government targets, but it's at a much lower rate than many other European countries, which means Britain is just not keeping pace with the rate of growth in household waste.
That's pretty worrying, isn't it?
It certainly is. What is more, we need to understand that if we are to achieve a more rational and sustainable use of our resources in this country, then we have to develop a fundamental change in the way we think about waste.
That won't be easy. What suggestions did you propose?
Just give me a second. Let me check my notes. OK, got it. Basically, there are a couple of ways this could be achieved. One of these is for more household waste to be separated.
You mean separated into things like newspapers, tins, and stuff like that?
Yes, that's the idea. Then this separated waste would obviously need different forms of collection by local councils, but most importantly, it will require an expansion in the market for collected materials, which is one of the major barriers to increased recycling. New government targets have also been set for recycling or composting 30% of household waste by 2010.
But that's almost a 4-fold increase, isn't it?
It is indeed. Rather a frightening figure, whichever way you look at it.
Track 11.
As you say, it's a 4-fold increase, but my guess is it won't stop there. You must remember the previous government found that setting targets is one thing, but if the practical policies are not in place, nothing will happen.
So what is the government planning to do about all this waste?
Well, apparently they're going to publish a final strategy setting out a range of policies to start and sustain the necessary changes. But the interesting part for me was that it's not only up to the government. To say we need more recycling is a simple message, but, and here is the crux of the matter, there's another one that isn't getting enough attention.
Really? What's that?
It's quite obvious, really. It's us, the general public. We have to reduce the amount of waste we make. It's our responsibility. Did you know that every hour enough waste is produced to fill the Sydney Opera House, and the rate is increasing?
Actually, now you mention it, I remember reading somewhere that the reason for all this waste is our increasing wealth and the changes to our lifestyles. I guess it's quite obvious when you really think about it. I mean, it's things like shops and supermarkets selling more pre-packaged foods and ready-made meals.
Convenience is the key. People simply want their lives to be more convenient. And there's also technological change that brings pressure to make people change their domestic appliances for newer models.
I never thought about that, but you're right. And I'm just as guilty. I threw out my old stereo so I could have a better model, even though there wasn't really anything wrong with the old one.
You see, you're a classic example that changing our present throwaway culture is going to be an enormous challenge. At the end of the day, consumers will have an important role to play. It could all boil down to their choices and their willingness to support recycling by sorting their waste and accepting more recycled products.
Track 12. 1,
Importance.
2,
Futile.
3,
Solution.
4,
Targets.
5,
Public.
6,
Household.
7,
Conventional.
8,
Convenience.
9,
Policies.
10,
Appliance.
11,
Fundamental.
12,
Sustain.
13,
Domestic.
14,
Sustainable.
15,
Recycles.
16.
Propose.
Track 13. 1,
The UK has less recycled household waste and rather more industrial and commercial waste.
2,
The government needs to start and sustain changes in refuse collection.
3,
The general public needs to think more about recycling and develop a fundamental change in the way they get rid of their domestic waste.
4,
He made the suggestion that a sustainable solution required an expansion in the market.
Track 14.
Good morning. As part of our lecture series on everyday health issues, today's talk is on tiredness. We shall look at the main issues in turn, as well as some of the main research that has been carried out in this field. Firstly, It is clear that tiredness is on the rise. No official data exists on the rate of people reporting to doctors with recurring tiredness, but it's a very common complaint. Research suggests that people are not relaxing properly and often work when they do not have enough energy. Furthermore, products to boost energy are also on the rise. Sales of so-called energy drinks loaded with caffeine and sugar have grown by 23% over the last year. And this is not the only instance of an increase in products claiming to boost energy. Guarana, a herbal stimulant, can now be found in everything from chocolate bars to tea bags. Now let's examine what it is that's making people so tired. Dr. Liebhold, a Sydney GP, has done extensive research into this, and he believes that financial pressures, not taking holidays, and not having time off when you become ill due to fear of losing your job are all common causes. Some of the other suggested causes are low oxygen levels in offices, poor diet, or illness. The problem is that tiredness is a symptom of just about every kind of illness, which makes tracking down the cause all the more difficult. The next question to ask is, are people getting enough sleep? Dr. Mansfield from Melbourne's Epworth Sleep Centre, who specialises in sleep disorders, says insomnia often arises when people are going through a stressful period. Mansfield often needs to re-educate people in how to get off to sleep. He recommends keeping your body clock regular by going to bed and rising at similar times every day, and not drinking too much caffeine. And there is some truth in the old story about having a glass of hot milk before bed. Milk contains the amino acid tryptophan, which has been shown to help induce sleepiness. Turning to the question of why we need sleep, researchers are still trying to answer this fundamental question. Sleep deprivation experiments have shown that after 14 days without sleep, rats will lie down and die. And after only 3 days sleep loss, humans get confused, forgetful, and start having hallucinations. So whatever sleep does, it is important.
Track 15.
Let's now look at the medical aspect of the problem. If ongoing tiredness is present, a diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome might be considered. University of New South Wales expert Professor Lloyd says that by a process of elimination, researchers have tracked the site of this problem to the brain, and Lloyd believes it is a problem with the proper functioning of the brain rather than any structural abnormality. The good news, however, is that most chronic fatigue sufferers make a full recovery within 6 months of being diagnosed. The final area to examine is diet. Sydney-based naturopath Leonie Macmillan believes inadequate breakfast is a common cause of tiredness and recommends increasing the consumption of protein at breakfast.
Track 16.
However, not all researchers feel the same way. Trent Watson of the Dietitians Association is not convinced by Macmillan's theory, explaining that our bodies don't really like to burn protein as a fuel, so it doesn't really contribute to energy levels. Carbohydrates, however, found in fruit, breads and pastas, are a more common fuel. Anyone following a rigidly high-protein diet with low carbohydrates, even if they are operating at low intensity during the day, could subject themselves to fatigue because they just don't have the carbohydrate stores, Watson says. In general, a good way to stay energised from a dietary point of view is to eat red meat, green leafy vegetables and whole grains. These foods give red blood cells the building blocks for optimum performance in their role of delivering oxygen to muscles. To sum up, tiredness is a health problem on the increase, and there continues to be much debate surrounding its causes and remedies. Now, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Track 17.
This week's Our World program comes from Canada, where Usha Lee McFarling sends this report on how global warming is affecting the behavior of polar bears and creating problems for the town of Churchill, which depends on the bears for tourism.
The Hudson Bay polar bears are an unusual group. They spend half their year living on the frozen sea ice, And in a normal year, around springtime, when the weather gets warmer, the bears move onto land as the sea ice begins to melt. Once they have done this, their lives enter a new phase, which involves a change in their metabolism. They don't hibernate, but their bodies slow down because they won't eat for the next 6 months. During this half of the year, they lose hundreds of pounds in weight. Each autumn, as the temperature falls, the bears migrate past the small town of Churchill, waiting for the Hudson Bay to freeze over again. When it has, the bears go back onto the sea ice. Now they can build up their fat reserves by feeding on seals. They survive because the surface of the Hudson Bay is normally frozen from mid-October through to mid-April. During these months, the bears sleep on ice floes and swim in the frigid waters. Normally, that means millions of dollars for the town of Churchill, which earns money by taking tourists into the tundra to see the bears as they pass by the town. However, recently the weather has been warmer and the bears' behavior has changed. The warm weather prevents the sea from freezing, and so the hungry bears come into town looking for food.
Track 18.
Having spent 6 months without food, the bears are at their most hungry and dangerous. Starving bears often lose their natural wariness and wander into town. If a town resident spots a bear, they call the Bear Alert Program on 675 BEAR, day or night, to report a bear in town. Officer Richard Romaniuk and his crew will then shoot the bear with a sleeping dart. It will then be taken to Polar Bear Prison. Sometimes the officers capture 4 bears in a day. To keep the animals from associating humans with food, they are not fed in prison. The bears are kept locked up until the sea freezes. Once the sea has frozen again, the bears are airlifted by helicopter and flown back to return to their natural winter habitat. The program has 2 objectives. The first is to protect people from the bears. The second is to protect the bears from the people.
Track 19.
The town of Churchill has good reason to look after the bears. Rough estimates indicate the province of Manitoba earns in the region of $300 million each year from bear tourism. Bears are the backbone of our economy, said town manager Darren Ottaway. While Ottaway is concerned about an abundance of hungry bears coming to town in the short term, he is even more worried that global warming may mean no bears here at all one day. For 3 weeks during bear season, Sleepy Churchill blooms as about 15,000 tourists stream through town, hoping to get close-up views of the animals from caravans of heated tundra buggies. Several chartered jets unload bear gazers at the Churchill airport each day. Hotels and restaurants closed during the bleak winter fill to capacity. Polar bears are not currently an endangered species. Their total population is estimated to be from 22,000 to 27,000. But the 1,200 Hudson Bay bears could face what scientists call a local extinction. They could produce fewer cubs and eventually die out. Officials and business leaders in Churchill have already begun planning for alternative ways of generating income. Ottaway is promoting whale watching and is delighted that Japanese tourists are willing to brave the bone-chilling cold of winter to view the northern lights. It's super news for us, Ottaway said of the potential Japanese tourist boom. Warmer weather, Ottaway said, could also extend the shipping season on Hudson Bay and attract more filmmakers. The science fiction classic Iceman was filmed nearby, as well as an upcoming film, The Snow Walker. When people talk about climate change, you have to look at the benefits too, Ottaway said. Others, however, feel differently. The bears have been in our community for years, said one resident. They're like neighbors, and everybody ought to be helping to make sure their natural life cycle can be maintained.
Track 20. 1,
Area.
2,
Category.
3,
Community.
4,
Economy.
5,
Enormous.
6,
Estimate.
7,
Minor.
8,
Phenomenon.
9,
Potential.
10,
Region.
11,
Resident.
12.
Strategy.
Track 21. 1,
The Hudson Bay polar bears are an unusual group.
2,
Sometimes the officers capture 4 bears in a day.
3,
The town of Churchill has good reason to look after the bears.
4,
Polar bears are not currently an endangered species.
5.
The bears have been in our community for years.
Track 22.
My favorite animal is a camel. It is quite a large animal, and one thing about it that makes it easy to recognize is that it has a hump, either 1 or 2, depending on the type. I think I saw my first camel when I went to visit my uncle. He lives in a town where camel racing is really popular, so you see camels everywhere, sometimes just walking in the streets. I really like camels because, for me, they move so gracefully when they walk, and I've always found it fascinating that they can survive for long periods without water. I feel the camel is an important symbol of my country because I guess many people associate camels with my country. It's also an important animal for food. I mean, we drink camel milk. And, of course, racing camels make lots of money for their owners, so there's an economic aspect as well.
Track 23.
I think there is a dual responsibility for protecting animals. Firstly, it is the responsibility of governments to make sure this happens. There should be laws to ensure, for example, that whales and dolphins are protected. I remember reading somewhere that quite a few dolphins get killed because they get caught in fishing nets. Of course, we, the general public, also have an important part to play in this. As far as dolphins are concerned, we can make sure we only buy tinned fish that is dolphin-friendly, and what I mean by this is that the correct fishing methods have been used. I feel quite strongly that animals like dolphins must be protected because if we don't do this, dolphins could be in danger of becoming extinct, and that would be a real shame. There would be other effects too, like to the tourist industry. I mean, if you think about it, in many countries like New Zealand and Australia, tourists pay to go and look at the dolphins and even swim with them, which must be quite an unforgettable experience.
Track 24.
Good morning and welcome to this series of lectures on man interfering with nature. This morning we are going to look at the issue of cloning. I'd like to begin by looking at some examples of animals that have been cloned before moving on to looking at how cloning is defined. The first example I'd like to talk about is Idaho Gem, who was the very first mule to be cloned. Mules are a combination of horse and donkey. Idaho Gem is an identical copy of his brother Taz, who is a racing champion, Thus, we can make the conclusion here that he was cloned to follow in his brother's footsteps. The next example I'd like to refer to is Cece, which stands for copycat. Like her name suggests, she was the first cloned kitten. Interestingly, Cece was created in a laboratory in the state of Texas by the very same scientists who made Dolly the sheep in Scotland. Cece is physically identical to her mother Rainbow, and what is important about this is that it has opened the doors for people to clone their pets in the future. Now, the last animal example I'd like to look at today is the pig. In 2001, 5 piglets were born, all female. They were created by a firm who claimed that their birth is an important step for medicine. The idea is that pig organs and cells could be used in human transplants because the pigs have been cloned without a certain cell. This cell is a vital link because it is the one in human beings that is responsible for making the body reject donor organs. This means that not only is the transplant operation unsuccessful, but the patient's life could be at risk. Now, I'd like to discuss some of the current definitions of cloning.
Track 25.
One kind of cloning, the kind commonly found in plants, occurs when plants reproduce themselves around the original plants, known as the parent plants. New plants can then grow. This is quite a natural process by which plants can form more of the same type of plant. Though you may not be aware of it, another type of cloning happens quite naturally in your body when old cells need to be replaced. Cells in your body split into 2 and make new chromosomes, and it is the chromosomes that contain our genes. Embryo splitting is another form of cloning, which can happen quite naturally when cells split to form 2 identical twins. You may then be asking yourself what all the fuss is about, if cloning does in fact happen naturally because sometimes man can interfere with nature and it can work. Take embryo splitting as an example. Now, this type of cloning is quite common in farming, and it is used to breed new bulls and cows. Embryos are placed into foster mother cows, and these then grow into calves. And though some may consider this to be artificial, it has been going on for the last 10 years with relatively few problems. Now, the last type of cloning I'd like to mention is perhaps the most controversial. This type of cloning is called nuclear transfer, and it is when the nucleus of a cell is put into an egg of another animal that is genetically the same. This is done in a laboratory, and after about 5 or 6 days, the embryo is implanted into a donor mother, which is how Dolly the sheep was made. One argument in favor of cloning is that it can help in medicine, as in the case of pigs being used in transplant operations. It is true that many people can wait for up to a year for a new kidney, and then still run the risk of their bodies rejecting the donor kidney. But will using pig organs really be the solution? To answer this question, I'd like to take a look at some responses to the whole idea of using pig organs in humans. Neil Blackwood, who works for the company that cloned the 5 piglets, described it as a major medical advance that could solve the global problem of a lack of organs to use in transplant operations. This could lead in the future to saving human lives. Sheila Halliday, a leading transplant surgeon, does not share his view. She believes that although it is possible to use pig organs in humans, there are very real dangers. Halliday points out that diseases and infections could be passed from pig to human. Of course, she does not yet know this for certain, which is why Halliday strongly advocates that more scientific research be done. She firmly believes pig organs should not be used in human operations until these findings are made public.
Track 26.
Good morning. How can I help you?
I'm thinking of taking a year off university next year, and I'd like to travel around Europe.
Okay then. Do you have any idea where you'd like to go?
Well, I was thinking of starting in France and then working my way up to Eastern Europe, possibly going as far as Slovakia.
Well, there are a number of ways you can do this, and we have various options available. It really depends on your budget and how you'd like to travel.
That's just the thing, really. I've just finished my second year at university, so obviously I'd like to do it in as cheap a way as possible.
That's fine. Could you give me a rough idea of the price range you're looking at?
Realistically speaking, I'm hoping to pay between about £700 and £900. I could stretch to £1,100, but that's really my limit.
How long are you thinking of going for?
About 10 months.
To be honest, you'd be better off travelling for about 7 months, if that's your budget.
OK, that's not too bad. So, how would you suggest I travel?
Well, because of the time limit, I don't think walking is a viable option. Of course, in this day and age, the most convenient way to get around is by flying, particularly if you've got quite a bit you want to see in a short space of time. Saying that, I still think the best way to get around Europe is by train. As a student, you can also get a student rail card, which means cheaper fares.
That sounds brilliant. How do I go about getting a rail card?
Well, if you decide that's what you want to do, then we can organise that all for you. You'll need to fill in a form and provide us with 2 passport photos, and we'll do the rest. It costs about £36 plus about £10 administration costs.
Great. That's really not expensive at all. And what about buses? I was just thinking if I decide to go to places which are a bit more remote.
There are always local buses, but these are not always a good idea. They can be quite unreliable and in some areas quite dangerous because the buses tend to be overcrowded and some of the drivers drive way too fast. So I would suggest you don't do this.
That sounds quite frightening. So what are my options then?
You could hire a car, but it can be expensive. Still, I do think if you're thinking about going to smaller towns and places which are off the beaten track, then hiring a car is by far the better way to do it. You can also look at sharing the costs by hiring a car with someone else.
That's a good idea. I guess I could put a message on the internet.
You could do that. But don't forget that you meet people when you're travelling, and you'll probably find someone who's going to the same place as you are.
That's true. I want to stay in youth hostels, so I'm sure I'll find people who are interested in going to the same places. Oh, one last thing. What about taxis? I was thinking about if I go out at night. I use taxis all the time here.
But taxis abroad are a different story. In certain countries, they're no problem, but by and large, taxi fares are high. If you do go out at night, try walking home, but make sure you don't do this alone. Try and find people to go out with at night or come home at a reasonable time. But if you're staying in youth hostels, you should find plenty of young people to go out with at night.
I'm sure I will.
Track 27.
Now, have you thought about how you'd like to travel to France?
Not really, no.
There are basically 3 ways. You can go by ferry, which leaves every day and night, or there's the hovercraft, which is more pricey, but will get you there quicker, and, of course, you could fly.
Well, I don't think flying is an option for me, as it'll be too expensive. So I suppose I'll choose one of the other 2. It's a pity, really, as I don't fancy the idea of travelling by sea. Last time I did that, I got terribly seasick.
Well, you're in luck then, as at the moment there's a special deal on flights to France. In fact, a plane ticket is now half the price of a ferry ticket, which is usually the cheapest option.
That's great. I'll do that then. I much prefer flying anyway.
I'll need to get some details off you then. Firstly, how will you be paying? Cash, cheque or credit card? If you pay by cheque, you'll need a cheque guarantee card.
I don't have my chequebook with me, so it'll have to be by credit card.
Fine, that's no problem. If you could just sign over here, and then we'll have a look at flight times, and I can sort out a youth travel card for you.
Fine. Oh, can I use your pen, please?
No problem. Now, let's look at times. There is a flight leaving at 9 a.m. and one that leaves half an hour later, or you can choose a later flight at 11:30.
No, I think 11:30 is too late, so I think I'd prefer the flight that leaves after 9. I'm not very good at getting up in the morning.
No problem. Just give me a moment. Right, that's booked for you. Please remember that if you want to change this, you must give 24 hours notice or you will lose your place.
Track 28.
Good morning, and welcome to this morning's lecture on transport. What I'll be doing today is comparing forms of transport in different countries to see how forms of transport are affected by factors such as geographical landscape and economic development. My focus will be on countries in South America, Europe, and Asia. The first country I'd like to look at is Colombia, which is in South America. This is a country where geography plays an important role. Due to the huge amount of mountains and forests in this country, travelling by air is crucial. I don't know if many of you realise this fact, but Colombia was the first country to establish a commercial airline, and in so doing they made aviation history. Today, there are more than 400 airports in Colombia for domestic flights, which highlights the point I made earlier that air travel is a vital means of transport in this country. Colombia also has a road network of about 48,000 kilometres, linking Colombia to Venezuela and Ecuador. Transport by road is important for trade as well as tourism. Apart from this, there is also a railway system, but it is in need of modernisation. The other means of transport is by steamers, with the Magdalena being the main waterway. Now let's turn to Colombia's neighbour, Venezuela. Once again, we see that internal flights are an important means of transport, as like Colombia, Venezuela has remote areas where flying is the easiest means of travelling from A to B. Trains are not popular, and most of the railway lines are in the highlands, as this is where the iron ore mines are. Trains are an efficient means of transporting the iron ore from the mines to the factories. Thus we can see how transport and the economy are interrelated. Ships are also used extensively in this country, and there are many ports, the main seaports being Puerto Cabello and Guanta. Turning now to Europe. Belgium is a country that boasts one of the most compact railway systems worldwide. Inland waterways, or canals, are also an important means of transport, transporting both freight and people. Belgium also has the third largest seaport in the world, namely Antwerpen. Air travel is also important, although this is not linked to geographical terrain, as is the case in the South American countries we've already looked at. Next, I'd like to look at the United Kingdom. Like Belgium, the UK has inland waterways around 4,000 kilometres, yet only about 17% of these are used for commercial transport. The main inland port is Manchester, and the chief seaport is London, with Southampton taking second place. Air travel is extensive in this country, and there are around 150 airports, the most famous being Heathrow. However, about 90% of passengers in the UK travel by road.
Track 29.
Finally, I'd like to look at two Asian countries. China is a country which reveals how geographical size affects transport development. Roads and railways are widely used, and this has led to a huge amount of bridges being built, such as the Yangtze Bridge, which is probably the most widely known. The Yangtze Bridge is 1.6 kilometres long and is built on 2 levels. The upper tier is for cars and pedestrians, while the lower is for trains. Railways are especially important, and over 80% of freight and passengers are transported by rail. With such a high proportion of people using trains, it is not surprising that governments in countries like China are prepared to invest in the railway system. Obviously, a fast and effective train service will encourage businesses and the general public to continue using it. The last country I'm going to mention is Japan, which has one of the most advanced transport systems in the world. The railway system is highly developed, and the Tokaido Railway, connecting Tokyo and Osaka, has trains that can travel up to 250 kilometres per hour. Ships are also a vital means of transport in both international and domestic areas. To summarise, we can see that transport varies throughout the world, yet the importance of transport networks, be they air, sea, rail or road, cannot be underestimated.